yourself down. Talk to the moment, Jack, will you?
Now is the time for all good men to come there to the goddamn. Good morning. The second day of the Webster show. And during today's programs, I will definitely be taking telephone calls so you can tell me succinctly and bluntly what you thought of yesterday's show and of the general proposition of Webster on the far side of prime time. But today we start with another national political leader, Ed Broadbent of the New Democratic Party. And I couldn't resist interviewing Broadbent in the sunshine on a log in English Bay.
You had the gall to come to English Bay today and not bring your swim trunks?
Look, not only did I do that, but I never got caught swimming without them.
Never ever?
Never, not here in English Bay.
Matter
And the
of
water was magnificent, and I didn't run into the Sasquatch once.
Good for Broadbent. Later on, as I say, we'll be taking the telephone calls, but first, Broadbent. The first question I put to Ed Broadbent of the NDP was a kind of basic question. With all the millions of working people in this country, and the long and in many ways successful history of the NDP in social change, why is it that the party, Mr. Broadbent, hasn't caught fire and doesn't look like catching fire yet?
We are growing, Jack. Look, we haven't formed the government at the federal level yet, but since 1969, we have been growing while the Liberals have been disappearing all over the country at the provincial level. We formed a government in this province, in Saskatchewan. We re-elected one in Manitoba. We became the official opposition in Ontario. And before you say it, yes, we lost some of those governments, but our vote held, and the other parties have either coalesced behind the social credit or disappeared, like the Liberals have done in Manitoba, like they're doing in Saskatchewan. So we're growing, and not as fast as I would like it by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm confident that the Liberals are on their way out, and there will be a two-party fight in this country, and we're going to be one of the parties.
How long? I'll concede.
I'm not going to make predictions.
Oh, just a minute. I'll
Yeah.
concede that the Liberals are on their way out provincially. None here. They lost Reagan. They're in a bad state all across the country. The NDP ain't doing so well either.
They'd form a government. All the indications I've heard in British Columbia, if there was an election now, and there may be, provincially we'd form the government again.
I didn't come to talk provincial politics, but just by the by, one of your best MPs, Leggett, has left Ottawa and obviously wants to be Premier of BC.
Well, Stu Leggett has got to be one of the most able guys that was ever elected, not only in our caucus, but any in Ottawa. But like a lot of people from British Columbia with a family, he's had a tough time going over those mountains every week to Ottawa, feels very much at home in provincial politics, and has decided he's going to run provincially, and I can understand that. It's our loss, I'll say right away, and the province's gain.
Mr. Broadbent, the New Democrats' philosophy nowadays seems to be a bit vague to me. Why don't you spell it out for me?
What it means overwhelmingly in this point in our history is that every man, woman, and child who wants to work ought to be able to. That in Western Europe has been the whole thrust of our party. In Saskatchewan today, the best level of unemployment in Canada, namely the lowest level. The overriding objective of a social democratic party is to have a well-functioning economy where any man or woman who wants to work can do so.
Even if he has to work as a civil servant?
Well, I don't say even if. They're damn good civil servants. There are many that are making a much more positive contribution in some sectors than, for example, a guy who spends his life advertising and selling soap.
You haven't set my soul on fire, though. Do you mean that the NDP is a true socialist party which eventually will control the means of production to give all work to those who wish it? What's the phrase you used to use?
You sound like an old Scottish European socialist that repeats old cliches.
Old cliches gone now?
Yes, yeah. No, the real drive of the party is, I can't give it to you in a one-line, 30-second clip. The prime thing now, as I said, here as well as Europe, is to have a society in which men and women can work. Secondly, in which we develop a real sense of community. And that means narrowing the income gaps. That means having our poor people who are working, I'm talking about working poor, working beyond the poverty level, having decent incomes, and those that have millions of dollars, narrowing the gap between the two. So the traditional goal is A, the capacity for men and women to be working, B, developing a sense of community, some kind of respect, and more than respect, a sort of a sense of obligation for your fellow man.
Do
and that
unto
can only,
others.
exactly, and that can only be done by narrowing gaps between people.
Do unto others. Good, broad, egalitarian plan for no rich, no poor, all good workers in the middle.
No rich, no poor certainly, substantially narrowing of gaps, but not for some, you know, one of the cliches you hear is, oh, everyone is just the same. And that's just rubbish, you know. The Scandinavian countries have an active creative cinema in Sweden, as you well know, that dress designs in Finland. You don't need to have uniformity. I want to head off some of your arguments before you come to them.
No.
That by narrowing the gaps, you open up the opportunities for the vast majority of people to do interesting and exciting things.
Is there not a climate in this country today where people are getting kind of fed up with the bureaucratic kind of welfare system taking away their liberties?
I think there's a state of antipathy, animosity towards governments that have done nothing. There's not a feeling that we don't need government. There's a feeling that we don't need big government, ineffective government. Our stress, for example, and Alan Blakeney, who has in Saskatchewan the lowest number of civil servants per capita in Canada. Ironically, the conservative governments of Ontario and Alberta have more per capita civil servants than anyone. What Blakeney has demonstrated and what we would want to do at the national level is to have an effective government. You know, just while we're taping this program, just before here in British Columbia, I talked about the magnificent fishery potential on our west coast, on our east coast. Marvelous. With an 85-cent dollar, we should be out there hustling in the world, moving in on markets to sell our fish products that we've never done before. No, because we haven't had the kind of leadership, for example, at the economic level, they have in Japan. Here's Japan, who needs the fish. What are they doing? They're coming in, buying into the BC fishery. Instead of us expanding our fishery to sell to them, they're coming in and buying. They will get the profits to be able to be used for reinvestment.
You're telling me a socialist government would properly plan business expansion?
You're damn right, to put it bluntly.
But we don't.
Helmut Schmidt, Trudeau went and had a chat with Helmut Schmidt, who is a social democrat, runs the most efficient and productive government in the world in Germany today. What they believe in is efficient planning with the private sector, a little drive and initiative. We would do, for example, with the fishery, what we've done for our farmers in the prairies. Have a national fisheries board that would get out there and hustle in the world.
More boards, we're sick and tired of boards.
Well, that's what I'm telling you. You need
We're
effective
sick and
ones.
tired of them.
Well, no. If you have effective ones, our farmers are amongst the most prosperous in the world in the prairies. Why? Because we've had a national policy in the last 3 decades that's gone to the Asian markets, that's gone to Europe to sell for our farmers.
Question.
We should do it for our fishermen.
Question. Do you believe that it was Helmut Schmidt who put the arm on Trudeau, thereby taking away Chrétien's credibility on the quick change of economic plans?
Look, no one needed to do that with Trudeau. He has been more effective in undermining all his cabinet ministers than anyone from outside could possibly imagine. He's destroyed every sort of man, whether I agree with them or not, whether it's John Turner or Don MacDonald or Eric Kearns, a number of people who had some kind of independence, they've all gone from the cabinet.
Monroe?
Monroe was gone too.
Peltier?
Yeah. Well, I'm saying,
Vachon.
I'm just giving some off the top of my head who had some independence
Kearns.
of stature, and they've all left. So Trudeau has been a man, unlike, say, Saint Laurent or Pearson, who brought on competent, driving people. Trudeau's had the opposite effect. They've gone out of his
All right,
cabinet.
put that positively. What is wrong with Trudeau in that he drives effective people out of his cabinet?
Effective is, I think the overriding reason is he's a dilettante. He's a dilettante in the sense that he's a very intelligent guy, but hasn't mastered in a serious way the art of effective government. So he set up sort of symposiums and discussions in cabinet. Rather than having competent cabinet ministers and letting them have authority with their departments, he has in fact driven such people out, and he's had little college boy kinds of discussions.
Would you say
For
that?
10 years we've had drift with him.
Would you say that has been his biggest single failure?
I think so. His failure to take ultimately government responsibility seriously.
But don't you shudder at the possibility that he'll produce his charisma and perhaps even get back into office?
Oh, I think that's gone beyond question now. He may get back in. He may, though I doubt that. You know, any one of us, mayor, win or lose. I really have no doubt that his so-called charisma is gone. It began to go away when he did the flip-flop on the controls issue. People up to that point, I think, you may have disliked Trudeau, but you respected his integrity. You thought there's a tough SOB maybe, and you either liked him or disliked him, but you didn't up to that point question his credibility. Now, since the controls issue particularly, Canadians, I think, appropriately have seen him as a rather cynical guy who simply wants to hold on to power.
Pierre denies he'll touch Clark's $5,000 mortgage plan at all, but do you think he might flip-flop on that issue yet if he catches fire?
Sure, that's entirely a possibility. He attacked Bob Stanfield on the controls issue, and right after the election he brought them in. They've said the same thing with regard to Clark's proposal, which, because it gives much more to the rich than it does to the poor, is a natural Tory proposal, but it's also, for that reason, quite susceptible to being implemented by the Liberals.
You wouldn't go for that Clark plan, would you?
No. We want something to be done for mortgages for middle and low-income people, but you don't bring in a plan that gives someone in my position, and quite literally, with my mortgage, with my income, under Clark's proposal, I would save about $3,000 a year. Now, an ordinary family with $15,000 income would save a few $100s. Now, that's not a housing program. As I said recently, that's a sort of welfare subsidy for the well-off.
Talking about welfare subsidies, and talking about UIC. Again, the man in the union, the man in the pub says, 3.9 billion, all kinds of rip-offs, no work ethics. You'll agree with Trudeau that the UIC has got to be tightened up to prevent rip-offs, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, but who isn't going to agree with that? I mean, I'm going to say
Well, you
I'm
would.
opposed to
You would.
bureaucracy. So, if where rip-offs exist, bring in the force of law. If someone cheats, if you cheat on the UIC, I want you to pay up or go to jail.
UI wasn't insurance. UI has been really a kind of guaranteed income scheme, hasn't it?
No. What do you mean, guaranteed income scheme?
Well, you worked for 8 weeks, quit, collected 39 weeks, what, another 8 weeks in due course?
No, I was in Newfoundland, time we're taping this, 10 days ago. Talked to a woman in a fish plant whose husband was unemployed. She could work in that fish plant, as you say, sort of 8 weeks at a shot, maybe 3 times a year at 8 weeks of a shot. Now, she could get some unemployment insurance in the interim. What are you going to do if you don't have the unemployment insurance for that woman in the fish plant industry? If you're not going to revitalize the fishing industry, are you going to leave that woman out on welfare? Or if she contributes, and I contribute and you contribute, why shouldn't she be able to collect as long as she's looking for a job? Surely we've got to, in the private sector and the public sector, be making a determined effort to create the possibility for jobs. Now, if she cheats on that system, if she cheats on it, then cut her off. But don't throw her out. You know, when there's 1 million unemployed, surely that's not the time to throw people out of a benefit without doing something about jobs.
If we've got 1 million unemployed, and of course we speak from the affluence of the West Coast, we don't see them.
I think
we don't see them.
Probably in your circles and normally in mine, you wouldn't see them. I wouldn't see them. I'm talking to politicians who, whatever the party, I say, frankly, are normally pretty busy people. But I can take you to whole parts of this country where you'll run into them.
Would you consider, if you were running the country or had the balance of power in your hand, a little thing on UI, one unemployment insurance check to one family instead of the old 2 checks to a family here?
Do you have any idea of what that would cost to administer?
Listen, they're doing it on family allowance. They're balancing it on your income tax returns.
Well, you get the family allowance check goes to the head of the household. Now, if you have an unemployment insurance scheme where you've got 2, 3, 4 people working and only one person is going to get it, how are you ever going, apart from any other difficulties, how are you ever going to administer that? You'd have to set up a great bureaucratic police state to use your own concern, a legitimate concern, to enforce it.
What's the best you can hope for after the election next year?
Forming a government. That's the best.
Oh, we're among friends, eh?
Well, you asked what's the best I could hope for.
What's the best you expect? I'd forgotten you're an academician.
Yeah.
What's your
You'll be calling me a Trudeauite in a minute. No.
What's your realistic assessment?
My realistic assessment is that we're going to do better than we've ever done before. How many seats that will be, I won't give a number to because I don't know. But I think we're going to do it because we're talking about jobs. We're talking about inflation. We're coming up with particular solutions, whether they're by no means perfect, but they're things that we think will work that the other parties are ignoring.
I suppose I've got to ask you about the constitutional reforms. Does
No, you
anybody
don't.
care?
Not many.
Do people ask you about
Appropriate.
constitutional reforms?
No, just liberals. Just liberals who hope that I would say that they're important. No, most Canadians, indeed Quebecers, the vast majority of Quebecers have the same concerns as people here in British Columbia, which are economic concerns.
Can we all relax now that Levesque's done? And that Ryan will take over and be as difficult to deal with as Levesque is?
No, I don't think we can all relax. I think that the referendum, it shouldn't be seen as a foregone conclusion. I think we're going to win it. That is the Federalist side. But I wouldn't say at all it should be approached on the assumption that we're going to win it. It'll be a battle.
Were you sorry to see Monroe go? Was he a good Labour leader or
I
a
think,
poor one?
No, I think John Monroe was,
Labour minister.
I think he was a decent man whose policies, needless to say, I differed with considerably, but his impulses were good. And he wanted to do something for the average guy.
Ready for your skinny dip?
Let's go.
Okay.
Front of the desk, we're going to put it on the front of the desk.
Tell him I've changed my mind. This is going to be interesting, taking telephone calls on television and trying to make it real to you. And as I said yesterday, and the crack got good response, when you phone me, there'll still be a 6-second delay, don't forget that. You've got to turn your sound down, and most important of all, when you phone, you will not see yourself on television. But it's good to get down to business. I've already been hammered, you know, friends everywhere, for being soft on Trudeau, criticized for me, of all people, being so enthusiastic about the $159 million spent on Robson Square. As far as I'm concerned, we're stuck with it. We might as well enjoy it. We can't sell it any way, shape, or form. But once again, to give you the gossip, I was put in my place over the civil service luxury lounge. And the civil servants are very important people, and I love them dearly. But I couldn't help pointing out yesterday how their open work area has been spoiled by stuffy civil servants with their high partition. You know, the place is just absolutely beautiful. You must take a tour down there and watch it. You're not supposed to go into this luxury lounge, however. That's for civil servants only. The cost. I can't get a breakdown on the cost. The park, of course, overall costs $40 million. As I say, we've got to enjoy it. See? Lovely. But, where I was put down yesterday by the civil servant was very cutely. I made my usual snide and snarky remarks, and the guy phones me and he says, "Look, Jack," he says, "you've been around us long enough to know that we did not ask for, nor did we want, that fancy $1 million lounge. We hate sitting out there in public with our brown bags. What we really wanted, if we'd been asked, what we wanted was a grubby little kitchen somewhere with a hot plate where we could eat our brown bags and make our coffee in actual peace and quiet." Now, no more from me, maybe something from you about Robson Square. Oh, by the way, before I forget Robson Square, there was one basic design fault, and that was that somebody forgot to put in a garbage removal system. Caused the merchants considerable trouble. It has since, however, some kind of system has now been put in. And they've had terrible trouble with the computerized security. Supposed to be one man who sits there, you see. Bells ring, lights flash if doors open. It doesn't work. Not yet. At least not when I checked it last week. Now, we come back to the old Webster City Mike bit. I'm not going to use the City Mike title anymore. It just doesn't seem appropriate when you're covering the whole province on BCTV. And you saw me yesterday with Trudeau, accusing him of being wishy-washy on the election date. And one of the great reasons for the problems in this country today is no election till next spring.
And now Bill Bennett's going the same way. Rumours, rife, speculation. It's going to be announced last week in Kelowna. It's going to be announced next week here. I'm beginning to think that Bill is getting a little bit nervous, because my first reaction was, what issue has he really got? Constitutional reform? I can see the people of BC just flocking to the polls on constitutional reform. And I don't think we can whip up the monarchy thing, if you believe Trudeau at all, and you must believe some of what he says, into something that's going to split the country apart on constitutional issues. One of the stories I will be working on, however, will be the civic campaign for Vancouver's mayor. Not because it's going to be the be-all and end-all of everything I do on television, but, you know, he's the second most important man in British Columbia, the mayor of Vancouver, if he's a good mayor. Can't resist it. Dear old Jack Volrich. And I'm not going to mention things that go on your wrist. He seems to have lost every bit of luster he had, and he's under very sharp attack. So you've got Jack running again. You've got Volrich. You've got Rathie coming out of retirement. Rathie's good, solid businessman type candidate who will get a fair amount of support west of Cambie Street. A fellow called Danny Basida is running. I'm reliably informed by BC TV News. Danny Basida running for mayor of Vancouver. I think his platform is that he's going to run special passes on the buses to get the old age pensioners to his nightclubs. He's not, in any way, shape or form, a serious candidate. May Brown, in my humble opinion, I don't know her that well, but, you know, I know her. She was big in the Parks Board and all the rest of it. She's been blackjacked into running. I see the fine hand of Art Phillips in there blackjacking May. May didn't want to go. May's a modest person, and lots not to be modest about. But May obviously has been told, we need you. Team needs you, or team will be destroyed. And then there's Bruce York, of course. Well, he can't win, and he knows it. What a pity that Harry Rankin didn't go this year. You know, Harry's an incredible contradiction. He represents the extreme left, and at the same time, he represents the extreme right. He is by far the most experienced man in council. He would be a good, solid, middle-of-the-road mayor, establishing his base with maybe Erickson and one other on council, or maybe just himself. But Harry has decided, obviously, and I haven't spoken to Harry, but he's obviously made the decision that he makes the decisions, that he's not going to take any chances of losing his front and center seat on city council. I think that Harry would have got a lot more support than he ever dreamed, might well have made it. And there's only one thing wrong with Harry being mayor. And this is really not a fair remark, but then when have I ever been fair? I think that he would have dumped Edinburgh as a twin city for Vancouver and would have twinned us instead with Havana, Cuba. But I'm sorry, really sorry he's not going. Now, big moment this morning. We're going to go to the phones. Now, not to be schoolmasterish, but please, I went through this for years on radio and finally got the people who called me reasonably well educated on the topic. Matter of fact, if you've never seen me nervous before, you can see me nervous now, because taking calls on television is going to be much more tricky than taking calls on radio. What I'm looking for this morning, I suppose, is I'm not that keen on the welcome back things, you know. Hello, Jack. How are you, Jack? Nice to have you back. We missed you, all that kind of thing. I don't mind if you keep it short, but I'm going to take my very first call on Webster, on television, and what'll I do, Fred? Will I just punch the button? Will it work? Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Webster. If you think you're nervous, it's my first call too.
You're nervous?
Yes, I am.
Why should you be nervous?
I don't know. I'm not used to doing this sort of thing.
Well, I'm not going to be nasty. I'm not going to be the old brusque Webster this morning.
I think it's probably better if you were.
No. I'm a nice old grandfather on occasions, and I'll be that to you. And I'm not going to guess ages, sexes, marital problems, or anything else until I become secure. Now, what would you like to say?
Well, I was just going to say that I enjoyed your program yesterday very much. Also, I don't know whether you know, they have a similar area in Calgary to the one in Robsonstrasse.
But they've got money.
Oh, do they?
They've got money coming out their ears in Alberta.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh. I see. And then the next thing is that my husband's a civil servant, and a more conscientious and hard-working man you would never find.
I know. I believe that. And I bet you if he works down there, he doesn't want a couple of $1 million spent on that lounge.
He doesn't work down there, and he doesn't go and have his lunch there.
Thanks very much for your call. You weren't the least bit nervous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
I would like to congratulate you on your initial show.
Oh, we're going to have all these Polish accents again. I can hear that.
I want to congratulate you on your initial show and tell you, although when you were on radio, I wasn't really one of your fans, I did feel that in both your interview yesterday and your interview this morning, you seemed somehow to humanize these two politicians. And I liked your style, if that's the correct word. I really liked your style, and I think it'll make the ordinary person maybe appreciate these politicians a bit better.
Well, that's my job. If I can provoke them when I have to, and I can be kind of human when I can, and make you see them as human beings and not just politicians, because people like myself have done an awful lot to damage. I mean, I must have discouraged 100 people from going into television because of the bad time you give them, and they may start off very decent people.
Yes.
And we in the media tend to destroy them for the sake of a headline, sake of a cheap crack. That's why I was so kind to Harry this morning. I really mean it about Harry that he should have gone this year, because he'll be 60 in the next election. And as everybody knows, 60 is too old to start a new challenge.
Yes.
Thanks very much. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Jack.
Morning.
This is Dave Schreck.
Good morning, Davey.
I wanted to congratulate you on your move to TV. I think you're doing much better in the move than Fotheringham ever did. Not to flatter your ego too much, though.
Good for you, Davey. Davey Schreck, in case you don't know it, was the man who ran the Greater Vancouver, the Human Resources Board for Levy.
That's right.
Then he left and became a stalwart of COPE.
That's right, and I'm running for alderman.
You people are the most active propagandists, and I got to give you full credit for that.
Well,
and you secretly agree with me, Davey, don't you, that this was the year Harry should have gone for mayor?
Well, 4 days ago, I was arguing that Harry should run, and even though I was in a competition at the time with Bruce York myself.
Right, I know that.
But once May Brown declared, my position was that we needed a candidate to put forward our platform. And we need that, quite frankly, because of the way the media treats the campaign. A lot of publicity goes towards the mayoralty candidate. And we have a policy platform that's different than any other.
I know your policy platform. I'm sorry you didn't win in your bash for Harry for mayor. Did I get you right, that you would have gone to Harry for mayor?
Well, until May Brown declared.
Until she declared.
May Brown declared, my personal feeling was we couldn't afford to take a chance on losing Harry. Harry is much too important to the...
Okay, Davey, thanks for your call. Thanks for your call, and I'll be back with more phone calls immediately after this break. As you know, I'm taking phone calls from... Oh, wrong camera. As you know, I'm taking phone calls from all over the province of British Columbia. My first call from Kelowna. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Jack.
Morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm fine. What do you want to say?
I want to say that I enjoyed your program very much. You're coming in loud and clear. For the first time in my life, I've watched two masters at work yesterday when you were interviewing Prime Minister Trudeau. But also for the first time, I think we got the best insight into Trudeau as a man that we've ever been able to get through the media.
Did I tell you that I did one thing to relax him, and this is a tale out of school, but I tend to be honest whenever it's desirable. I told his principal assistant, I said, you can tell him to relax during the interview. I will not be asking him about certain personal problems he had in the past.
I think that was very, very clever of you, Jack. I think our main concern as Canadians is to get a true insight into the actual man Trudeau, which we've never been able to get through the media. At least I haven't in 10 years of watching and following.
I wasn't very happy with the number of his answers, but you got to give him credit. He certainly comes on strong. Well, keep watching at Kelowna, 9 o'clock every morning, precisely.
Good luck to you, Jack.
Thank you. Go ahead from Port Alberni.
Yes? Mr. Webster,
Yes, ma'am.
in our homes, I have a message to pass on what concerned all British Columbians.
What is it?
In 1975, Williams, Minister of Water and Land Resources, told City Council in Port Alberni that if you don't declare a $10 million people's investment, a floodplain, you get no money for a flood study.
Listen, ma'am, I'm interested. Linda will talk to you off the air and see if there's a situation I should follow up.
Yes.
That kind of call is difficult for me to follow and make other listeners interested. So, Linda, will you talk to her off the air? Will you take Port Alberni? Good. I'll take another call at the moment. Which one will I go to, Linda?
Hello?
I'll take this one. Go ahead, please.
Hello. Election time is like about the only time that there's any communication in this country that's pertinent. But I appreciate you taking us to Ottawa, but I think that where the changes have to be made to put this country on the right road are in our own personal lives, you know, like Canada's the result of the lifestyling of 22 million people.
Sir, I love your philosophy. I know it starts at the bottom, but that's not the line of country I'll be going into when I'm covering political campaigns. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Webster.
Yes, ma'am.
The difference between the two leaders of our federal governments is quite obvious. I think I would vote for Mr. Broadbent any day. He seems to be more humanitarian. But there is one thing I would like you to do, and that is find out why we can never have the books open for corporations.
Well, that's too specious a question, ma'am, but I know what you're getting at. You're talking about the Government Information Act. Matter of fact, I'm going to give Ched Baldwin a good going over on that one day very shortly. Now, no more calls for the moment because it's something else I must do. Thanks for your call, ma'am. Apropos to part of my discussion this morning was an interview I had the other day, and I want to use it before it dies because it shows you, I think, how Art Phillips was really in there making sure that May Brown, and this is an interview with Art Phillips. Boy, Art Phillips, I don't know how you can run for Parliament with a clear conscience when I look at the mess you've left behind in the city of Vancouver. How do you plead to that? Guilty or not guilty?
I plead totally innocent. No, I think that the city couldn't have been left in better shape. I mean, even the present administration isn't messing it up. How's that?
What do you mean isn't messing it up?
No, the city was in good shape. I left it in good shape. I'm very happy with it.
You
The finances were in good shape, and the other things were, the staff is in good shape. It was a good time to retire.
It certainly was, but you certainly didn't leave your own political organization in good shape, and now the whole place is in a mishmash, an uproar. What's going to happen?
I don't know. It makes it kind of interesting.
You agree it's in a mishmash and an uproar?
Oh, yeah. I would have thought until a month or so ago that it was fairly clear-cut, and I thought that Jack Ulrich would run again, get re-elected, and so on. And I think things have changed somewhat. There's been a lot of developments in the last month, so it makes the civic scene quite interesting.
I've got a question you won't answer. If the ballot says choice for mayor between Rankin, Harcourt, Fulrich, and Rathie, who would you vote for?
May Brown.
Ah, you're dodgy. I never know, of course, in these things. But anyway, you'd be inclined to vote for Rankin, a good, solid member of the establishment.
I like Harry. Harry would be very interesting as mayor. But I really would like to see May Brown as mayor.
All right, let's leave that. But when it comes to federal politics, I've never known what you really were. I remember one time the rumors were around that you wanted an appointment from Social Credit as a financial consultant or the finance minister or whatever. That's right, isn't it?
I talked to Bill Bennett about possibly running at one time, but didn't really want to. At that time I was involved in the civic scene. I was very happy with the civic scene and I wanted to stay there.
I know, but the fact is that the Art Phillips I've known for a number of years, in fact since before you could really talk on a microphone, right?
Yes.
Is an Art Phillips who would run either for the Liberals, the Social Credit, or the Conservatives, depending on the leadership and the kind of, and I'm not saying this is anything wrong about you, the political climate at that time.
Yeah. Well, I've never regarded myself as, you know, a party-first kind of person. I've always been interested in the issues and in the government climate. In fact, I've voted for every party at one time or another, including the NDP. But basically, I've been a Liberal most of my life. I've worked for the Liberals. I've run as a Liberal provincially once many years ago.
You're beaten? Of course you did.
Yeah, in
Where was that?
1963 in Point Grey. And I've worked on the policy side for the Liberal Party many years ago. When I got into the civic government, I felt it was best to get inactive at the federal and provincial scene because I had to deal with various people, particularly when I was mayor, whatever their stripes were. And I didn't want to be an identified partisan person in that role, so I just let it go by.
I was a bit disappointed in you, though, when you took the job, as after due deliberation, because you're not that quick off the mark on these things, as chairman of the BC Police Commission, and then whammo, you quit after 4 months. Does that indicate some new instability in the fairly stable Phillips?
Well, I haven't done that kind of thing before, and I don't like to do that kind of thing. When you take a job, you expect to do it for some time, and I certainly did.
5 years that was, wasn't it?
Well, it was a 5-year contract. I expected to do it for at least 3. However, what happened was my own personal circumstances changed somewhat faster than I would have anticipated, and I felt that there was a need down in Ottawa, that I had a lot of people pressing me to take a look at that. I went and had a conversation with the Prime Minister, and I came away feeling that I could do a job down there. So I said, yes, I would run on one condition. And
what
that
was the condition?
The condition was that Bill Bennett gave his blessing to my being a candidate and my resigning from the BC Police Commission. So we checked it out with Bill Bennett and with Gardy Gardam, and I got not only their blessing, but really a feeling that they would welcome that.
Isn't it funny, though, that in Vancouver Centre you're riding?
Yeah.
But here we've got two, I suppose, economic experts. Plus Ron Johnson, you've got Pat Carney and Art Phillips. Mind you, Joe would never appoint a woman, even if he wins as finance minister, would he?
I think he might.
Is she good? Is Pat any good?
I think Pat's a very good economic consultant.
How are you?
I'm very good, too.
Well, try and explain the current parlous state of the economy of this nation under the Liberals. It's because, of course, the government is committed to so much organised social welfare spending that we're bound to go down the hill to egalitarianism and heavier taxes, isn't it?
Well, I've been accused of running sort of against my own party in some ways, particularly when I first announced, because I was quite critical of spending being out of control and so on, and I think there were some serious miscalculations made in the early and middle 70s as to spending programs that they launched. A lot of people say the minority government of 72-4 was a good one, but that was where a lot of these programs actually were launched, and they were impossible to control once they were going. They were legislation, and they just kept on going, and the revenues didn't keep up. Anyhow, I think it's critically important that the government gets its own finances under control. And when I first announced, and at my nominating meeting when I spoke about these things, it seemed to be quite critical of the Liberals, and I'm very happy now that it looks now a lot less critical, because I think that the moves they've taken in the last couple of months have been very good ones.
Well, the moves that see the dollar going down to 80 cents almost certainly are, won't it?
I mean the moves that they've taken to control spending.
You mean the 3.7 billion cut and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, those are tough measures, and they're hard to institute, and they take a long time to turn that big colossus around. But I think they're turning it around now, and I think those are moves in the right direction. I've heard some people quibble about how they were done, and I don't care how they were done. I'm glad they were done.
If I'm the heckler, I'm going to say, Phillips, you're one of these people that wants to cut me off unemployment insurance, wants to reduce my benefits to this much and my working qualification to that much. And you'll say, certainly, the economy must come
first. I'll say that
first.
I think the unemployment insurance scheme was abused, and I think it's too slack. I think that's true.
Personally, how old are you now, 39?
48, just a week and a half ago.
Well, you don't look a day more than 39. I'll give you credit for that much.
Neither do you, Jack.
What are you doing in the meantime, though? This interregnum. Here you are, you quit the job, you're racing to Ottawa, and whammo, the PM says, next spring.
Yeah. Well,
that's tough, but except that you've got money. It doesn't matter.
It's unsettling. I have an interest in my investment counseling firm, which is a very good one. It's doing very well, and I spend some time down at that office. And fortunately, I'm in a position where I can do that kind of flexibly. So I'm spending some time down there, and I'm going down to Ottawa to try and get to know some of the people in the system there a bit better. So I don't want to waste the next 6 months. If I am elected when the election comes, I'd like to be more familiar with the system.
One final personal question. Old nosy Webster. What did you pay for that house in False Creek?
We paid just over $100,000 for that house.
That included your improvements inside it. That
Yes,
wasn't it.
but it does not include the land. The city owns all the land in False Creek, so we lease the land from the city.
What could you sell it on the market for today? 90?
I don't know. I have not had any feelers on our particular housing units. I think that probably they might be a little higher than what we paid for them, but I'm not sure.
Art Phillips. I think, just in closing, I'll say that how many elections have you lost? Just the one in Point Grey?
Just the one when I ran provincially in Point Grey. Yeah.
Pity you left team in such a mess, isn't it?
Oh, it'll survive. And the city's in good shape. That's what really matters.
I'll be quite honest with you. It's going to take me a little time to get steam up and get involved in my own particular issues and, crusades, I suppose. But the phones obviously are going to be an integral part of confrontation with politicians, not just Webster by himself, unless I've got something really good going. But back to them for this segment, too. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack Webster.
Morning.
I was watching yesterday's your,
First show.
Mr. Trudeau.
Uh-huh.
Trudeau is a great man. He was done past years. It's a very good job.
Okay, great man, you think. I'll reserve judgment on all of them. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Jack.
Morning.
I was listening to your show yesterday and appreciate it, but there's one thing I wish you had brought up to Trudeau and you would bring up to other members that you speak to, and that is the basic exemption on income tax.
Well, isn't it on the cost of living index now, the basic exemption?
Yes, but the thing is that $1,750 basic exemption, it does not give a person today to live. You have to be up around the $4,000, and you have to start taking income tax away from you.
Sure, but, when you get involved in that kind of question with politicians, they either give you a specious or a spurious answer. I think really you got to make up your mind about the politicians specifically. Now, Clark has gone with what Trudeau says is a bribe to the middle class. And if you're at the 4,000 level, God help you, you must resent that Clark offer. Do you?
Well, I do, because there are a lot of us pensioners that are below that.
Listen, the pensioners are the people with the problems, and I'll watch that angle very closely. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Your comments yesterday on Robson Square regarding the architectural fee.
Yes.
I think you quoted a figure of something in the range of $10 million.
I quoted a figure precisely for all engineering and architectural fees for design and supervision so far of $12.6 million.
Seems like a staggering figure. I wonder if you would be inclined to try and get some kind of a breakdown on that. It seems to be an awfully large cost.
I've already got an inquiry in for the breakdown from the BC, what do they call it, BC Building Corporation. That is a good figure. It comes from the best of sources. It's what you expect in $160 million.
Well, it works out to something in the range of around 8%, a ballpark figure of 8%. And based on the original quote of $50 million, 8% would have been $4 million, and that seems to me to be out of line. So do these figures run in direct ratio to the increase in cost?
Yes, I believe they run on a percentage basis.
Well,
now, the $50 million was for the Bennett Tower. I think the initial estimate for Robson Square was something $85 million, see?
Well, it would be...
But the commissions will rise with the escalating cost. And don't forget, we had a change of plans which cost $10 million extra and caused 1 year's delay.
Right.
Now, this is something that will come out in the public accounts, and I'll give you the specific breakdowns to the specific firms when it's available. Excellent. But as I said yesterday, while I got some cooperation, BC, dreadful name, they want to have everything all set for the big fancy opening. They didn't really want me to do that shot at all.
Right.
But I'm glad I've raised the point, and the figure I state is $12.6 million engineering and architects' fees, and Arthur Erickson's firm for design and supervision got, Arthur agrees that he got the lion's share of that money.
Well,
a lot of work involved. a lot of supervision involved, but to you and me and the little people, it seems an awful lot of money.
It is. It is a lot of money.
Glad you raised the point.
Okay.
And don't hesitate to nag me if I don't follow up on something.
Right.
You know, if I don't give you the breakdown, tell me I haven't done it, and I'll just have to get off my seat and find out.
I'm sure you'll do it.
Do my best. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Now, go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I would like to congratulate you on your opening meeting yesterday. It was simply fantastic. I'm happy for us that we see your smile. We heard your lovely Scotch accent on the radio, but to be able to see you personally doing it is wonderful.
All this nonsense about me being so old, it's just lies. I created it for
Not
maturity. I'm only 39.
I know. But after all, I was 39 a year or so ago, too.
Mm.
But no, the thing is this.
You'll notice I'm sitting down today. I look slimmer.
Would it be possible to get a copy of the questions and answers for yesterday? Because believe me, I'm far more knowledgeable than I was before I listened to that program.
Well, the Prime Minister's office will kill me for this, but they prepared transcripts of these programs so that the record is straight. You write to the PM and he'll send you a copy.
Really?
I
It was
wouldn't
really
do it.
wonderful, but I want to wish you luck, and I want to congratulate us on having you there.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I think your program is marvelous.
I recognize that voice from the old days.
We must get rid of Mr. Trudeau as he is becoming more...
If you want to get rid of him, ma'am, get out and get your mother and father and grandchildren to vote against him. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Yes.
Right. I thought I'd give you a call since you mentioned earlier in your program today about elections, federal or provincial, and there's something that clicked in my little old mind. Remember Judge Eckhart's Electoral Reform Commission?
Do I ever?
Right. Well, all that's come out of it is redistribution, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's happened with the voters' lists and all the different segments?
Don't worry about the voters list. The NDP say that the redistribution is a classic gerrymandering, but at the same time, I must remind the NDP that they had a chance to redistribute and they put up a commission and they didn't do it.
Right. Well,
So
I'm just
therefore they're
wondering
kind
if perhaps sometime in the future you could check out to see if there's going to be anything further, because I believe that Judge Eckhart's still working on the balance of that election.
Oh, yes. There are other matters such as the form of voting, the alternative ballot, and the key things. But I don't think any government, least of all a social credit government, dare change the voting system from the simple X. I don't think they would dare try and get away with that. Long distance from where? Sydney, go ahead, please. Oh. How do I put it on hold, Linda? Oh. Go ahead, please. That's you, whatever you are.
I'm here.
Well, speak up then.
I'm sorry. Listen. Anyways, you certainly made Trudeau look good yesterday.
Well, that wasn't the plan. Where are you?
I'm calling from Sydney.
Well, keep speaking. I thought you had gone away for your breakfast.
No, I did. I almost got a mouthful of food, but heavens...
Well, don't phone me with a mouthful of food. In the name of goodness, it's a serious program.
An hour and a half for you.
Well, I know. Well, say it. Just swallow that mouthful and say your piece.
I did it right away. But I'll tell you one. You met your equal yesterday. I'm wrong. Trudeau met his equal yesterday. I'm surprised that you were sitting in front of Trudeau and you made him look good. Or you made yourself look good. I don't know which way. But listen, I did the wrong thing. I addressed him as Trudeau. Why don't you address the man in his proper status in life?
What's that?
As our Prime Minister of our country. It's a great country.
I called him Mr. Prime Minister. I called him Mr. Trudeau. I called him Sir, which is the proper way.
Especially Mr. Webster. I addressed...
Well, I mean, I thought you had some valid, legitimate criticism, but that I'm not so sure now. Thanks for your call. Phone again when you finish your breakfast. And I'll be back after this commercial break. We'll talk to them.
Better with the closing.
Mic check, Linda. Talk to me.
Hello, hello, hello.
Oh, yeah.
10 seconds. I'll turn to Linda. I think the telephone involvement on occasions, not the full show, is going to work. I'll tell you that much. Especially when we have a confrontation situation. We'll have Barrett soon, we'll have Bennett soon. We'll have other issues where you want to talk to people. Those presently holding on, I will talk to off the air after the program is finished. Linda.
Yes, good morning.
How you feeling?
Fine.
What's for tomorrow?
Well, you're not on tomorrow. You are preempted by the funeral of the Pope. But Thursday you have Jed Baldwin, the Conservative MP from Peace River, on the Freedom for Information Act.
Good. So that's tomorrow the Pope from 8 till 10 o'clock. We're off already on holiday. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, everybody. What's next? That's the end. 9 seconds to go. 6 seconds to go. I've enjoyed it. I hope you're enjoying it. And I'll do my damnedest to keep you up to date on provocative information and opinion.